Hello, family. My name is James Trice, and I'm the creator of a podcast called YANA, or You Are Not Alone. You Are Not Alone is a podcast for Black men. It is more than just a podcast. It's a lifeline and a brotherhood. We're here to create a supportive, judgment-free space where Black men can have real, open conversations about what truly matters to us, from family and relationships to community, sports, culture, politics, faith, sex, race, education, and the challenges of everyday life. We dive deep into it all. Whether you're looking for advice, motivation, prayer, or just the comfort of knowing you're not walking this journey alone. YANA is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard, because none of us are meant to do life alone. Look for new episodes weekly wherever you get your podcasts. And look for me on Instagram at jbtrice123. Welcome to YANA. Grace and peace, everyone. This is James Trice again. Welcome to another episode of You Are Not Alone, a place where Black men can come together and talk uncensored in a judgment-free environment about what matters most to us. And on today's episode, this is the third part in my conversation with Brother Mujasi Mandeli about the making of a Black man and the Black community. And I want us to just delve right into the conversation. I don't want to belabor this. So, Brother Mujasi, thank you again for this
Thank
third
you.
part, and we may
Yes.
do more. But let's
Mhm.
let's delve right into this conversation because I think we get into it and we don't have enough time. But I want you to say as much as you need to about this, and let's talk
Okay.
more about it. So anyway, so my first question for you as we start today is, I want you to say more about how the Black family, and I put that in quote, Black family, is critical to developing the Black man.
hmm
Say
hmm
more about
I
that.
think, yeah, I think I think this is where the basis of everything starts. And when we was talking about that in our last episode, I went home and I said, every time I'm in this space to be able to talk about this, it takes a while to get to the details and the specifics on the parental behavior practice and the family culture that's necessity for helping young males from birth infancy to move into manhood. Because manhood is, for the most part, it's a social definition. It's a constructed definition that deals with our culture, our peoplehood, and our identity. But the family have to be a prism of being able to create that. And the family, as we talked about last time, is not a nuclear model of a man, father, mother, and the children. The family is this kin, fictive kin, blood kin, or these relational ties to where we have a shared value and experience and an investment into the development and birth of our relationship and the young people that we create. So you can, your mom's best friend that you grew up with could be your auntie, even though that's not blood related. You may have a grandpa who was just an adopted stepfather or adopted person in that family, but that relationship and that shared experience and the values and the mores you create around that, that's what makes family. So with that, we have to understand that children go through stages. There's stages of operation and development. And one of the things I love pulling up with some of our Black masculinist researchers like Akbar's piece, he talks about the necessity of infants having healthy connections to parents at that infant stage. And what does that mean? It means that children, today we call that secure attachment. Today, we call that a healthy, trusting bond with a parent. And it means on a subconscious level, in the process where the child is developing their neurological makeup in their brain, they're building synapses in the brain that's constructing part of the brain that's essential for connecting with other human beings, which is critically important. And one of the things that I love about Yana, my brother James, is that you're describing from a principle point of view and from a very biblical point of view that we cannot be alone. We cannot be alone. It's virtually impossible for the growth of any human being to be alone. That's biblically written. It's been here since the beginning of time. And now the neuroscience back up what we've known for ages. That the brain, the healthy construction of the brain requires human interactions on an interdependent level for a healthy brain to mature and to develop. And in that stage of infancy, that child is developing trust, is developing the ability to be interdependent, connected, to develop these neurons called mirror neurons so they can be able to receive stimuli and signals that come from their senses to be able to mimic what they see other people are doing. This is on a psychobiological level, which means that we're setting the groundings for that child, that male, to be able to receive information and guidance and nurturing and role modeling from other human beings in their life. Now, we're talking about the infancy stage, but throughout the child's life, they go through infancy to that early childhood, which is a lot of neurological and biological growth, to the middle childhood, to that adolescent stage, to that late middle adolescent stage, to that launching stage, which is like early 20s, mid 20s, until they're adults, maturing adults. And then we could go into middle agehood, middle adulthood, and elderhood. Culturally, when we look at these different stages, if we're very invested of that young male becoming a man,
Mm,
that from the time that that child is in that infancy stage, that child is going to be interacting with men and women that is essentially responsible for their growth. And it's not just the mother and the father. They will have connections with grandparents. They're going to have connections with
mm,
aunties, with uncles, with siblings, with cousins, with loved ones who's going to be invested in their care and their well-being. So at that early middle childhood, they're seeing examples of what men look like in their life because they're having routine exposure, hopefully, to healthy functioning men in their life, providing a script to where not only are they receiving messages from the men in their life, but they're seeing it modeled in their life. And
mm,
children, 85% of what children learn in their life, they learn by what they see us do, not by what we
mm.
tell them.
Right.
15% is what we tell them. So
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to be essential and really serious and intentional about developing manhood, the child has to be exposed ongoingly to healthy, functioning, well-intended men in their life. And so there's that piece. Then we're communicating all the time. But communication is not just the process of administering words. The deepest, most critical form of communication is narrative and your experience with them. That's how we communicate, how we tell stories to them and give them experiential stories in their
Mm-hmm.
life, and how we
Mm-hmm.
create processes of routine, rituals, involving ourselves with guiding them, supporting them, creating structure, creating boundaries, living out
Mm-hmm.
expectations, modeling and working with them on being involved in the family culture. You're communicating the values of who they are and what their
Mm-hmm.
responsibility is. So, in that middle childhood to adolescence, they already have a role in the operation of the family. They
Mm-hmm.
already have a role in the care of their siblings. They already have a role in the hygiene of their home, let alone themselves, but the
Mm-hmm.
hygiene of their home and how they contribute to the home. And so all of this is a part of the process of disciplining them. Now, discipline, and I'm giving y'all a very critical word of discipline, all of this is a part of the process of teaching them. As we
Mm-hmm.
use the biblical stories and the histories of Jesus and the 12 disciples, the root word of disciples, as we already know, is to guide, is to teach, is
Mm-hmm.
not to punish anybody. And so when we're disciplining our children, we're teaching them in these various different modalities of how they
Mm-hmm.
learn. And that's the explicit memory. That's when they're recording it. That's when they saying, my father does this all the time. So this is what I'm gonna do. This is what my
Mm-hmm.
uncles do when they come together. So this is what I'm gonna do. And the male learns how to process emotions this way because they see their father do it. The male learns
Mm-hmm.
how to be responsible in the home because that's what they see my uncles do. The male
Mm-hmm.
learns to embrace in a brotherly way because that's what I've seen the brothers in my family and my community do. Every time I see my uncles or this man that comes around, he always say yes, ma'am, to my mom, or he always offer a seat to my grandma, or they're seeing these family cultural behaviors, and it becomes a part of their script because they're exposed to it. So when a child is given instruction, hey, go over there and make sure elder so and so is taken care of, they know what to do because it's like, oh, this is what we do. I've seen my uncles do this all the time. And so you're modeling to them. You're providing, by the time they get into adolescent stage, now you're providing real examples for them, proactive intentional engagements on how you engage them. We call it the PIA method, but it's proactive intentional activities to allow them to explore things that they do around your values. So let's say you have a value of education and learning. What activities are you subscribing and supporting that young male to learn and be engaged in learning all the time? And how are you creating that around them? It's not punishing them to do it, but you're giving them opportunity to do it. Being able to have intentional conversations to say, what do you want to explore? What do you want to learn about? And how I want to support you in creating some projects with them. This is why Jawanza Kunjufu always says, by the time a child is between 14 and 16, he should already be in practice with starting and running his own business. And
Mm-hmm.
some have said even early, because you're providing the proactive, intentional activities for them to learn financial management. If that's a value in your family, which
Mm-hmm.
it should be in
Mm-hmm.
mostly all Black families,
Right.
then you want to provide ways for that child at 12, 13, or 14 to be able to learn how to operate a budget, how to
Mm-hmm.
save, how to pay themselves, and how to create some type of product or service where they can offer themselves in that service to be able to monetize their support and contribution to their community. They're already doing it. And that's because you got men who's creating those proactive, intentional activities around the value principle of being able to provide that child that experience to learn that. This is how we're shaping them into men. But as you can see, I started with infancy, early childhood, middle childhood, adolescence, and those are just examples. Every single stage that the child go through, you're going to be intentional with creating scripts
Mm-hmm.
to guide them in that development and growth. And each
Mm-hmm.
stage has certain markers and hallmarks that we're looking for to be able to gauge the temperature. Are they ready
Mm-hmm.
for this? Are we seeing growth in this? Are they demonstrating certain outcomes or hallmarks of behaviors that we can say they've matured to this point? And this helps when a child is in a good, consistent routine. They have intentional engagement. They have room for their social emotional development, meaning like they can understand their emotional space, be able
Mm-hmm.
to process and articulate what they're going through. If we're guiding them and supporting them in all these various different modalities, you will have you're going to have some conflict and pushback. That's natural for most young people as they grow because that's a natural human tendency, but you'll be able to course correct easily. You'll be able to guide them in their learning. They'll be invested in their growth even when they're pushing back against mom and dad. They'll have
Mm-hmm.
at least the internal locus of control to be able to say, if my mom and dad says this, if my uncles and my aunties says this, and I want this, then let me evaluate if this is the direction if I should go. And if I choose to go in the direction against their advice, I have to be ready to take that accountability and responsibility for what comes in that outcomes. That's how you know a child is maturing on the road of being able to handle real life situations and experiences. And that's how we're cultivating manhood. But it starts prenatally, it starts as infancy. It starts with the father starting in the very beginning, the father holding that baby ongoingly, the father singing to that baby, that father reading to that baby at night, that father tucking that baby in, that father talking to them in regular words, not no baby words, but using diction at the early age of like 6, 7 months,
Yeah.
possibly before the baby is born, so that the way the baby is hearing these vibrations and those vibrations create the signal structure of how that baby's brain is developing between 0 and 5 years of age. There's a researcher, what's his name? Um Daniel Siegel and Michelle Hartsey. I think her name is Michelle Hartsey. They got a book called Parenting from the Inside Out. Phenomenal book because they're
Mm,
combining the behavior developments of children with the neuroscience. And I'll
hmm.
land here. Just even at that critical stage of 0 to 3 years of old age, they call that implicit memory development. And in
Okay.
an implicit memory development, young males, especially our children, we receive so many signals about life in that implicit memory. This is before they develop explicit memories. But in implicit memory, you can do a lot in shaping what becomes kind of like the rudimentary level of their brain and their outlook. You can establish culture right away through smells, through sounds, through voice, through music, through routines, through making sure that they have a security in how we're attending to their needs. If they're hungry, feed them. If they're sleepy, make sure they get rest. When it's time to play, let them play. At that implicit memory stage, children learn the world through play, exploration. And males in particular, they learn through being able to just manipulate and move things in their environment. These things are fundamental building blocks to the neural development of the brain. And what we see often is that when young boys, young males, can't be able to move into that space of mastery in their environment, we oftentimes can look at to what was their environmental like between that first 5 years of their life, 0 to 3 and 0 to 5. And then from there, we could kind of build and make up what they may be
Hmm.
delayed in. So every single stage of the family process of nurturing that young male into malehood is critically important. And we have to discard the idea that manhood starts at like some rites of passage at 13. No, 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 no. And this is where we make the mistake oftentimes. This is where Amos Wilson and even Akbar says we create too many boys masquerading as men because we think manhood is an alone process and it starts at somehow 16 or 18 years of age with decisions and just discipline. And that's not true. Manhood development and especially them moving into a cultural definition of manhood starts at infancy. It starts at building that child's brain up, making sure that the child is healthy, have a loving connection with numerous adults in the family culture of the family, and making sure that they're seeing, modeling, and understanding what healthy manhood looks like. Understanding their emotional world and having an anchoring on their spiritual world. A man ain't fully a man unless they know they're being guided by a divine spirit. And I'm gonna land right there in terms of that
Oh
question. I
yeah.
hope
Oh yeah.
I
Wow.
hope I
Thank you.
did some justice to it, brother.
Oh, you did. You did. I did. And so I have a few questions. One
Yes,
in
sir.
particular is what happens then to a young boy, young black male, let me say, who's 12, who didn't, I'm just saying, I'm just gonna throw out 12 as a number,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who didn't grow up with all of that, who didn't
Mm.
have that,
Mm-hmm.
who didn't have the like you just said about the father holding him as a child and speaking actual
Mm-hmm.
words instead of baby talk, who didn't have that
Mm-hmm.
nurturing that you talked about with the aunts and uncles and the family unit that is functional, a healthy family
Mm-hmm.
unit, and they grew up, and he grew up the opposite, right? He grew up with
Yeah.
trauma, right? Abuse, sexual abuse. Let's talk about that, right? He grew up that way. He
Mm-hmm.
grew up where there's drugs going on all over and prostitution and all that. I remember I saw a story. One of the I forget what it was one of the what do you call it, reality shows. I forget his name. He was talking, and I'm not gonna say his name because I want to do it
Yeah.
justice. But what he said
Mm-hmm.
was that him and his mother was on this program now, and he talked about how she, when he was like what 8, 9, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
brought prostitutes to his house. And matter of fact,
Wow.
I think he said that she um got him a prostitute, right? When he was like
Wow.
whatever age he was, and and how that was traumatizing to him. And
Mm-hmm.
her response was, "Well, I wanted you to have." What she said was, "I want you to have pussy instead of purses." And he was trying to express to her how traumatized he was with that experience, and she didn't get that he was like, "I'm hurting here."
Mm-hmm.
So what happens to a child that grows up like that, and they're now an adult male, and they didn't
Mm-hmm.
grow up like that? How do you course correct? Is there an ability to now change him to
Mm-hmm.
be now the male who now talks to his kid when he has a child and does
Mm-hmm.
all the functional things? Is there an
Mm-hmm.
ability to do that? And how does that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess my
I
question
think,
is, they're grown men now, grown up with all of this, didn't have
yeah.
everything you talked about. Now they're grown
Mm-hmm.
men and they're totally dysfunctional. They're out here bad. They sleep with all kinds of women, 12,
Mm-hmm.
13 kids, right? Different women, and they're
Mm-hmm.
just out here just doing it. They probably slanging or whatever else. And they just didn't
Mm-hmm.
grow up with any of that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Um, is it is it too late for them? And if it's not too late, what needs to happen in order for them to get on the track now of being
That's a
now a
good question.
functional, productive black man?
Yeah. And there's a lot there. There's a lot there. And when that scenario that you brought up made me think of that rapper. I don't want to say that rapper's name, that
Yep.
rapper who also, felt like he
On this
wanted to
reality shows.
graduate. Yeah, yep,
Yes.
exactly. And
Yes.
so, Frederick Douglass teaches us that it's easier to raise healthy children than it is to fix broken men.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have taken that as an axiom to just focus on the children. And if the man is kind of dysfunctional, traumatized, or delayed in their development, then there's nothing you can do about it. And I don't subscribe to that. I think regardless of any age that you're in, you can still have some incremental growth into actualizing manhood. But one of the things we talked about before we got on live is that you talked about the critical importance of brotherhood and other men being with
Yes.
other men in order
Yes.
to move and shift their idea and practice of manhood. Manhood is not a static state that we just get to. And I must say that very clear. Manhood is not a static state that we get to. You don't age into manhood. Manhood is not 18 years of age, it's not 21 years of age. I hate to bust the bubble in our community with that conversation. Those were arbitrary social conventions that was created around industrial contracts for labor, wartime drafting, and the ability to be able to operate a vehicle. Nothing about that had anything to do with designating men were men after that. It had everything to
Hmm.
do with corporations' monopoly. Now that we got that myth dispelled, what we find in your question is a lot that we can unpack there. Men who don't have that trajectory of healthy investment as a male growing up, our scholars in the 90s used to use the term arrested development often.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
This idea that we're stuck in a certain form of development that we have not been able to mature and master, and we kind of oscillate. We kind of swing on a pendulum in that particular stage. And I think there's some grounds to that. Now, we can look at this from a neuroscientific point of view, but from a community and a family practitioner piece, our manhood is not actualized because we're still operating with emotional, mental, and relational dynamics of dependency, which essentially is a boy. We're still operating in our adolescent stage. And this is not necessarily always our fault and our responsibility. As growing human beings, we have to take responsibility for it, but it's not always, we don't have to lay the fault on us.
Hmm.
Like you talked about, this stuff can be the result of numerous traumatic incidents that happen in our life where there wasn't no family. cohesiveness. There wasn't a family culture. There wasn't healthy relationships. And that young male had to navigate through survival and grit just to continue to survive and walk on this planet and to have some sensibility of themselves, some being of themselves. But that the cultural and social definition of manhood was just never instructed and guided in their life. In that space, we're always going to be in this, unless you're living on some remote island somewhere, there's always
Mm-hmm.
going to be a concept that's going to come upon you of like, are you truly a man?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a Christian man, or are you a Muslim man? Are you an American man? Something about manhood is going to land in you. Now, in that wrestling with that idea, that's where it becomes critical for that individual to assess, what do I understand about manhood? And where am I stuck at? And this process will require some type of therapy. And hands down, I'm an advocate for therapy, especially when it comes to what you just described as very kind of similar to my life, where there wasn't no instructions in my life on how to be a man. There was just distorted images of what I thought was manhood that
Mine neither,
centered
brother.
around, yeah,
Yes.
all of us,
Yep.
quite a few
Yep.
of us. It's centered around traumatic experiences, distorted misconceptions around sex and all. There was these things that were there that just didn't define manhood. And at a certain point, we get to a point where we question, is my manhood matching up to my reality?
Mm.
Am I is my relationships dictating in practice that I'm a man? Is my economics dictating in practice that I'm a man? Is my
Mm-hmm.
relationship with God dictating in practice I'm a man? Is my relationship with my children dictating in practice that I'm a man? Because all of those roles is centered around a healthy practice, not only definition, but practice of manhood. And if we get to the point where we realize I'm incomplete, I'm struggling, I'm having some hardships, and what that means, as a lot of us, some of my clients do, then we move you into the process of getting you in spaces with other men who are in that practice, who's trying to edify themselves. They meet in groups. They have conversations. It could be at their church. It could be at the mosque. It could be at a men's healing cycle that happens every 4 months. It could be just a bunch amongst some mentoring brothers who have some time and years with each other. It could be an elders council. Somewhere in that, you could be even join the Mason Masonic Lodge, wherever it is, where you see men coming together who's saying, I'm trying to temper myself to be a better human being than what I am, to mature myself. You have to engage it. You have to engage it. If you know you've been hurt by your parents or somebody in your life who was supposed to be your caregiver, but they created these experiences that has been a thorn in your well-being, your emotional self, therapy is also going to be a space for you to have those hard conversations about what it means to be a man. So we can rectify and at least get you moving in the proper direction to really strengthen and to investigate and explore, what does manhood look like. But no man can become a man by
That's right.
himself. He
Right.
needs to do it amongst a process of other men in order to sharpen his manhood, in order
Yeah.
to edify his manhood, to mold his manhood. He can't go back to being a child and move back in with
No.
mom to do that. No. At this point, if he's 30 in his 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or even 60s, you have to be around other men. And some of them may be 10 years younger than you, some of them may be 20 years older than you. But you need that interaction with healthy men and numerous men to be able to ask questions, to be able to process, to be able to see how they do it, to be able to model some of that, to be able to see how does that work in your life, to be able to explore that and to learn these new techniques on your own. But part of that is also reshaping, how do I build this in for myself? How does manhood become my new profound practice? And it takes time. And it's
Right.
always going to take time. Manhood is a practice. Manhood is a practice. And we get better at it over time. and it shifts. Like we was talking about before we went live. I'm sitting here, manhood when you're getting older requires a different care of physical attention. When you're in your
Yep, that's right.
16 to your mid 20s, you think you're impenetrable, like you vulnerable. You could, jump off 2 stories and get up and run a mile and then go eat and sleep for only 4 hours out the day. It's not like that. Manhood, in terms of self-care and self-build, when you get older, requires far more intention and attentiveness to your physical care. It requires attentiveness to how you do relationships, how you pray, how you nurture yourself, how you love on yourself, how you care for yourself, and how you're in healthy relationships with people around you. But you can't figure that out by yourself.
Right.
And there's some books that can get you there, but book knowledge and that intellectual knowledge is going to be different than the experiential knowledge.
That's
And you
right.
gain the experiential knowledge of practice of manhood when you're around other men and having
Hmm.
that interactive exchange to mature that for ourselves. So it's never too late for older brothers who are arrested in their development, who's traumatized and dealing with neuro adversities from their childhood growing up. It's never too late. You coming out of prison, whatever it is, it's never too late. There's always a process and a way to move you into the practice of manhood so that way you can fully feel like you have some autonomy and agency and control and practice and effect of your manhood in your relational life around you.
And when you say a manhood, you're referring to functional,
Yes,
positive,
yes.
responsible black men, not just manhood. Period. Because as you said, people have different definitions of what that is, and that is
Mm-hmm.
just it's a long
Mm-hmm.
process.
That's
Um,
right.
how? Then let me ask this question. Then let me just clarify a couple of things. One is
Mm-hmm.
now I remember it was his mom got him strippers for his birthday, and I think he was 12 years
Mm-hmm.
old, and his mom bought him strippers, and these strippers came and stripped in front of him while he was like 12 or 13,
Wow.
and it
Wow.
traumatized his life, right? He's a rapper, and he's on this
Yeah.
reality show. That's what it was. It wasn't a prostitute, so I want to clarify. It
Mm-hmm.
was strippers that his mom purchased for him.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So then you got to think about then what was that woman thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's why the
Mm-hmm.
family is so important. What was that woman thinking to get her 12-year-old son strippers for
That's
his
right.
birthday party, right?
That's right.
Uh,
That's right.
as so the other question I have then, you said every stage of development of manhood,
Mm-hmm.
a boy's into manhood is critical.
Yes.
Which stage would you think is the most critical, if there is a most critical?
Ooh, that's debatable. Hmm. So to reiterate to our listening audience, those stages again is prenatal, natal, infancy, or prenatal infancy, and one and the same. There's early childhood, which is 0 roughly to like 5 years of age. And I'm giving you the stages because you can't measure manhood by age. It's through
Right.
stages. Then there's middle childhood, everything up until probably 11, 10, 11, 12, 5 to 11, 12 years of age. Then there's adolescence. And adolescents have two periods. There's the early adolescence and kind of mid adolescence, 13, roughly in the puberty age, all the way into like that late teens, early 20s. And then there's the launching stage of life, which comes with another piece. And that's anywhere between that late teens to that mid 20s. And these are the stages of the brain growth. The brain in a healthy functioning person does not stop growing and developing and maturing into the late 20s. Okay. Now, if you're offset by neuroadversities like trauma and stress and toxic, unhealthy environments, that delay and blockage may prohibit you in your growth well into your 30s and the 40s. And so to sit up here to say which stage is probably the most critical important point, different scholars will say different things. Our Black manhood scholars will say that adolescent stage is critically important. Some of our newer scholars, especially our sisters who contribute to the conversations, like Dr. Renita Walker, she's going to probably say that that middle childhood is important. But then we see some of our neurologists today who's going to say everything from 0 and 5 years of age is the most critically important stages in terms of human development. So in terms of male development, yeah, I will probably I can make an argument for all, but I will probably lean on that 0 to 5 years of age. It doesn't mean that you can't continue to develop and mature a child even beyond that. But
Mm-hmm.
in that stage, you're establishing that implicit to explicit memory. You're establishing relationships between that child and how they understand the world. You're setting the first seeds of cultural identity. You're setting the first seeds of ethnic identity. You're setting the standard for what family life looks like. They're seeing the
Mm-hmm.
most important values and relationships with the human beings that interact with them. And that is by scientific measurements in family science, we say that's when you see the most growth of the brain of the young infant, of that young male, from 0 to 5 years of age. So, whatever
Mm-hmm.
you can do to establish a healthy bonding dynamic of the mother and the father and the uncles and the aunties and the grandparents in that 0 to 5 years of stage, you're setting what we call the mental model of that child for the rest of their life. And so from there, it's just kind of tilling the maloo. It's kind of nurturing the garden, but that garden is, for the most part, established quite well between that 0 and 5 years of age. Now, if it's not done, does that mean that you have to throw the child away? Of course not. Does that mean that the child is going to have problems with it? No, of course not. Everything could be healed from and repaired, mended, and continue to, develop. Even if you start to be more intentional in middle or childhood and adolescence. But it just means that there's some things that you have to work on that the child may not have in place. It might be trust issues because the child couldn't develop that physically neurological bonding trust with a caring adult when they were crying as an infant or crying as an early childhood. It might be anxiety pieces where the child have a quick prone tendency to get anxious when somebody leaves the room that supposedly care for them. They may have some unsecure ways of how they attach and connect with other human beings because there wasn't no consistent, secure relationship and healthy bonding for that child in those first 5 years. And those things can be repaired over time. It just requires a little bit more intentionality, awareness of it, and some developmental piece. But to answer your question, I would say that 0 to 5 years of age, especially when it comes to Black males, are critically important to establish their manhood for the
Well,
rest of their
well,
life.
thank you so much. We have come to the end of our
Oh,
time. Wasn't that quick?
okay.
That was
Yes.
so quick. Um, wow. I do have one more question to ask. If we could, real quick, answer this.
Yes. And
What
I'll be brief.
tools?
Five B's,
Right,
five B's. Be
right. Let's do
brief,
that.
brother. Be brief. Okay.
Yes. What can a single black woman do
Mhm.
in raising a black boy when she has none of those connections, family, whatever? She doesn't attend church or whatever, and she's by herself raising this young boy. What tools would you recommend she access, or what resources would you recommend uh, she
Mm.
search out in order to help her with raising this young black boy by herself?
So that's a good question. I would have to, in a case like that, I would have to explore why are you by yourself? Like,
Mm,
what's the context behind that? How do we move you into community where you have some healthier relationships with people and process in the community? If it's not possible to explore, making sure there's a healthy co-parenting, excuse me, co-parenting relationship with the father, and how do we make sure that there's other men in the family that can be a part of this process with you? And you have that intentional conversation of supporting the other men to just kind of pour in some ways. And if that's not viable, then I do have to make sure that I'm assessing, as a mother, or I'm advising them as a mother, how do I move into a community of space where I can be myself involved with other healthy relationships because I'm gonna need this for the development of my son. But how do I make sure that I'm putting my son in a space where he can interact with some healthy human beings? So that might mean I have to find a church to join. I might have to join a mosque or a synagogue if it's religious, or I might have to be a part of a cultural center where I'm building relationships with community therapists and community healers and elders, where I can have some interaction with people that I can introduce and make sure that my son has some interactions with ongoingly. But if it goes against even the principle of what Yana is about, what we're teaching that you can't parent alone.
Yeah,
It's not
can't.
possible. From a family scientist perspective, from my perspective, you can't raise a healthy child, let alone a black male, by yourself.
Yeah.
So you have to, this is before we even talking about the child, we have to look at what is the mother doing to where she's isolated and not involved with healthy interactions with other family and community process. We fix that and address that with the mother, then the child is gonna eventually will create a family ecosystem for that child
Wow.
to have a family culture that's gonna develop.
Well, thank you so much, brother. Well, that's
Yes,
the end
sir.
of this session, this piece, part 3 of our discussion. And we're gonna have some more questions. So let's do another session,
Mhm.
man. Do you mind?
Yes, let's do it. I
Let's get
love
right
it. I
into it because
love
there's
it.
a lot more questions I have,
We
and I think a
unpacking
lot
this.
people want to hear a lot. I mean, there's questions around same-sex couples
Yeah.
raising black boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether they be
Mm-hmm.
same-sex female or same-sex male raising black
Mm-hmm.
boys. I mean, there's this
Mm-hmm.
question of how does a black boy want to grow up to be a black male when black males in this country is synonymous or been typecast as villains, as criminals, as thugs, as
Mm-hmm.
no good, all this, right? All of the negative stereotypes they can, and there's so much more. And what separates black family making from traditional family making? And
Mm.
and the other, we're saying black family. So then is there a quote on family, right? What's the difference
Yes,
between
come
black
on.
family and then regular traditional Western Eurocentric family? I mean, all of those things
Yeah.
we can touch on. But I want to thank you again, and I will see
Thank
you
you.
next time.
Yeah.
Audience, thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned. Check into the next episode and hear
Yes.
more from my brother Mujasi Mandeli. And thank you so much. And again, remember. You're never meant to do life alone. All right.
Mm.
So don't try to do it. We're all interdependent on each other. And thank you so much for joining this episode of Yana. And until next time, grace and peace to you all. Blessings. Yana is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard because none of us are meant to do life alone.